And welcome to ABC 24 This Week. We are here every Sunday at 9 a.m. and 11 p.m. to bring you the real story behind the big stories. You can also catch us on our CW30 sister station at 9:30 p.m. We're doing something a little different this week, though, spending our entire 30 minutes on a topic that's been the source of controversy for nearly 10 years, but now, by all appearances, is headed for a resolution. I'm talking about the so-called 3G schools, Germantown High, Middle, and Elementary, which have been under control of the Memphis-Shelby County school system despite being inside the Germantown municipal school system since 2013. The agreement also calls for a new state-of-the-art high school to be built in Cordova to accommodate the 1,800 or so families now at Germantown High School. And we have assembled a fantastic panel to give this complicated issue some context today. To my right is the Reverend Kenneth Whalem, a pastor at New Olivet Worship Center. He is also a former Memphis City School Board member, so we're interested to get his perspective. Next is Lee Harris, the mayor of Shelby County, who helped lead negotiations for the plan that was announced this week. Next to him is Germantown Mayor Mike Palazzolo. And finally is Otis Sanford, ABC 24 political analyst. Thanks to everyone for being here. I want to start off by bringing our viewers, I guess, up to speed kind of where things are. So let's first watch this report from our Jay Shakur earlier this week.
The deal announced just this past Monday has two of Germantown's 3G schools becoming the property of Germantown and also provides a new high school for the Cordova area.
This gives a path forward for those displaced families. There's probably about 1,800 or so families that are wondering what comes next.
This path forward, as the mayor calls it, ends an almost 10-year dispute over who owns Germantown Elementary, Middle, and High schools. Although the exact terms of the agreement are still unclear, what we know so far is it allows up to 9 years for this transition to take place. How that will look is also unclear, but the mayor says at least in the near future, all students will stay right where they are until that new high school is built.
Nothing's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or the next year. We're very hopeful that that high school will be built and opened way before the 9-year transition period. But the point is, we want to leave plenty of ramping room.
As far as who will pay for the new $125 million high school, $72 million will come from Shelby County government, $5 million from the city of Germantown, and a still unknown amount from the sale of one of the 3G schools, which most presume is Germantown High School. But parents worry MSCS is giving up too much for too little, and they don't like all the unanswered questions.
When they did that move, I think it was really ridiculous because that's a chess move. I wouldn't have gave my queen up for a bishop.
The district saying the focus right now is securing funding and then feedback.
Right now, we're trying to make sure we have the guaranteed funding to build a new school for our students. But when it comes to the next stage, the planning transition stage, we actually want to hear from parents. We want input from parents. We want input from students. We want input from staff.
All right, that was our Jay Shakur reporting. So Mayor Mike Palazzolo, I want to have the first question directed to you. You heard the concern of that last parent, and he echoes what a lot of people are saying, including Dan Conaway, the columnist for the Daily Memphian, who said Germantown was committing robbery of the Memphis-Shelby County schools in broad daylight, and said you were driving the getaway car. So what is your response to that? Because there's that perception that when you look at the land alone of where Germantown Elementary and middle school and high school sit, that's worth a lot more than the $5 million that Germantown has proffered so far.
Sure, well, it's a great question, and the community really deserves an answer for that. You know, it's a solution. This is a solution-based agreement, and a lot of parties had to come together and bring a certain amount of capital to the equation. It's a little bit more than just $5 million. There's the ability to also sell Germantown High School, and by state statute, those funds were split between the city and Germantown Municipal School District and Memphis-Shelby County Schools. So it's a little bit more than $5 million. It's nuanced, and once the complete settlement comes out, I think the people will see a little bit more than just $5 million. It's truly a partnership by all four governmental bodies to come up with a compromise, a solution that protects multiple constituencies.
Otis, I'll let you have the next question.
Well, sure, and this probably is going to be directed to both of you because, and we talked a little bit off camera about this, the history of this has been so very complicated and very long running, and there's disagreement about how this thing came about historically. When Memphis City Schools gave up its charter, then the suburbanites decided to form their own separate school districts. Germantown form their own district without having the Germantown schools. When we look back on that, why did that have to happen? And Mayor, I'll start with you. You were not mayor at the time. I think you were on the city council, but from your perspective now, why did that have to happen where the Germantown schools were not part of the Germantown district?
Well, I think one of the reasons why this started in 2011 and 2012, in my experience, is because we've got a history of too much division in this community. We couldn't settle our differences outside of legal action. We went to court too soon, and we didn't work together as productively as we could have. I was on the Memphis City Council at that time. I was the only member of the City Council who vocally opposed suing our municipalities over their decision to start their own school districts. And I continue to believe that was a bad decision, and nothing came of it other than 10 years of confusion, which brought us to this moment. So at this point, I think everybody wants to move forward as one community. Everyone has participated in good faith, in a give and take process. And Memphis Shelby County school system is one of the really big winners here. I mean, obviously, Germantown and the residents of Germantown deserve to kind of guide their own future over the long term. But the really big winner is Memphis and Shelby County school systems and the superintendent, because for the first time in over a decade, we found a way to bring at least $100 million and maybe possibly even more than $100 million for a high school, which is probably going to be in the Cordova area. And again, that's the first high school the Memphis Shelby County school system has had in over 10 years. And so we see a new high school in Collierville. We see new high schools in suburban communities across the country. And now we're going to see one in the Cordova community, which is in the city of Memphis, by the way, and a project that the Memphis Shelby County school system will be able to bring to market.
Okay, Mayor, do you agree with that? And again, looking back at the history, it just seems, I've heard criticism that, Germantown was so eager to get away from Shelby County and Memphis schools that they said, okay, we'll abandon the Germantown schools.
Well, and not to get into revisionist history, so to speak, but those things happened so quick that many years ago. But moving forward, I agree with my colleague Mayor Harris in the sense that we are bringing a solution forward. And when we met 13 or so times prior to this last round of meetings with leaders from Memphis Shelby County Schools and our state leaders, there was one thing that came out, and this model was not sustainable in Germantown. Operating one school or three schools inside another LEA's boundaries was not sustainable. Germantown High School, built in '59 and other portions all the way up to 1980, has millions of dollars in deferred maintenance. All three of those schools do. And so now children are going to get a brand new school. We're all moving forward, and it's a solution. And so, I look at this as, how do we move forward and how do we do it together as a county?
Okay.
All right, Reverend William, your turn. I know you're very passionate about education, passionate about a lot of things, but education's right up there. And you were critical of Memphis surrendering its charter from the very beginning, which launched all of this. What is your read on what you know about this agreement so far? And if you had a question for one of these men, what would it be?
Well, I've never been more excited since before Memphis surrendered the charter. I've never been more excited about the possibilities of educating the children. There are two numbers that stood out to me in the reading that I did. I guess the final document is not available yet or hadn't been released yet.
In the works.
But there are two numbers, 9 years and $120 million, whatever that number is for the schools. 9 years is a long time. Fully 1/3 of the student body at Germantown is bussed in from outside of Germantown. Would you guys be agreeable to discussions to somehow try to educate at least that third in a method other than building a new school? Let me be clear. I just talked with the assessor. There are at least 1,000 vacant commercial properties in Shelby County, at least 1,000. I'm sure that maybe 3 times more than that, where there is space available for smaller teacher-student ratios. Would you guys be agreeable to talking about over the next 9 years, trying to provide an education, at least for the children who've been bused into Germantown, so that maybe a high school wouldn't cost $120 million if we could educate a significant number of children in a smaller type setting?
Mayor Harris, why don't you take that first?
So I think all the kids are transported into the schools
It's a
question.
lot, yeah.
So the Germantown, and I'll rely on the mayor of Germantown, but Germantown residents go elsewhere.
Houston High School.
They go to Houston High School, so they're all bussed in. So bussed in, that's one way of saying it. They all transport in. Most of the kids live in Cordova. And so the idea is to how do you recognize the growth that is going on in the Cordova area, continue to invest in that growth. We saw one of the largest development come to market yesterday at a groundbreaking, $400 million of investment in Cordova. We want to keep that community growing, and one of the ways you keep that community growing is invest in infrastructure. If the question is Shelby County willing to do more to invest in even more school facilities for kids around our county? We absolutely are.
Well, I'm not saying new facilities. I'm saying using commercial property, office space that's already existing that would not cost as much to provide education in those spaces. Would you be willing to talk about those kinds of things?
Absolutely, and I think the key here is that as we spend these resources, we need to spend them with a certain level of care and skepticism to make sure we're getting the bang for our buck. Right? We want to have the TV studio, we want to have the baccalaureate program that you see right now in Germantown High School, but we want to spend with a careful eye because we got a lot to do in this community. Maybe we can repurpose some of the buildings that already exist in Memphis and the historic core, maybe even in Cordova area, that'll satisfy some of our needs.
A lot of people would be happy to hear that.
Mayor Palazzolo, I got to take a break, but why don't you go ahead and give your spin first of all, and talk about the perceptions people may not know what we're alluding to here, and that's the attendance numbers.
Sure. Well, and I would defer to my local educators about new delivery mechanisms for public education, whether they're using new buildings or repurposed buildings. And, you know, one of the things that I looked about this is that this is a good way for Memphis Shelby County Schools to activate their Reimagine 901 plan. And that calls for neighborhood schools in neighborhoods so that you can reinvigorate neighborhoods and make schools a magnet. And I think that's what's going to happen in Cordova because, as you mentioned, very, very few, and I don't have the exact number, but it is literally probably less than 50 students that live in Germantown go to one of the 3G schools.
Right, and you've got kids being bussed in from Highway 64 up, north of the Wool Chase Mall.
Up to
coming
15
down
miles,
yeah,
yes,
it's
away.
A long time to spend on a bus, and no wonder why parents might be reluctant to get involved in their school community if they're that far away from it. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk a lot more about what the situation is and where it's going from here right after this.